I'm doing well. Thank you for
Wow.
asking.
Just- Settle in. Am I good? Man, too much technology is not a good thing, is it? I mean, my God. All right. Here we go. They're trying to confuse me by having the minutes here, but today we're going to open the Wyandotte Creek Groundwater Sustainable Agency meeting of February 27th, 2020. Please join me in the flag salute, the flag of our nation. Ready? Salute. Pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Roll call, please.
Board Member Connolly,
Here.
Board Member Goodson,
Here.
Board Member Pooley,
Here.
Board Member Bynum,
Here.
and Board Member Daly.
Well, welcome, Mr. Daly. All right, so next up is our consent agenda, and on that, we have just the minutes from the last meeting. Would anybody up here like to change the minutes or see any errors or omissions? Anybody from the public see any errors or omissions? I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes of the last meeting.
I'll second that motion.
No, I entertain a motion, you just
I
made
move.
it.
I'll make the motion.
There you go,
Excuse
getting
me,
trained up here.
to approve the minutes.
I second that.
Okay, first, second, any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay. Passes unanimously. Up there, next is our regular business. That's a review of the Wyandotte Creek Groundwater Sustainability Draft Chapter, Monitoring Protocols for Data Collection and Monitoring. Kelly Peterson.
Morning, Chairman, members of the board. I'm Kelly Peterson with Butte County. Not going to go through all the details of this particular chapter, but I wanted to just hit a few of the highlights. So, as you know, we've been working with a consultant team to roll out the basin setting portion of our GSP. The basin setting portion includes about 4 different sections. This is one of the draft chapters that was relatively low-hanging fruit in a sense, because it lines out how we're going to monitor according to certain protocols. So it was rather easy to sort of crank out. It's been reviewed by our management committee, and now it's being put in front of you guys for review, as well as we'll be providing this. We've provided this to the 3 members of our existing stakeholder advisory committee, which are those 3 organizational members, one's from Cal Water, one's from South Feather Water and Power, and now we have a new member from the Berry Creek Rancheria. So that's also been provided to them. This isn't an approval item, but at the probably fall of next year, we'll have all of these chapters ready for your official approvals at that time before final submission. So we wanted to just get a few pieces as they roll out in front of you guys to see kind of what they look like, and just sort of initial preparation. So this, like I said, is the monitoring protocols for data collection and monitoring. And in essence, DWR has what they call best management practices for what to put in a GSP. And what that includes is basically saying, this is how it should be written, and if there's anything in what you're currently doing that differs from that, you need to let us know what that is and why it's different. So what we did is we looked at what our existing protocols are, the ones that we currently follow, and then we looked at what's in the BMP, compared the 2, and then you can see where the differences are. And there aren't really that many differences, but what it lines out are 4 major things: how we monitor groundwater levels, how we monitor groundwater for quality, and in essence, our groundwater quality is really mainly for saline. So that's your salt factor from your underground marine sediments, as opposed to some of our other pollutants, which are covered by other agencies doing that work. It also lines out how we're going to monitor for subsidence, which is the sinking of the ground surface due to potential over-extraction of groundwater or oil, and also how we're going to monitor for stream flows. So in in essence, we've been monitoring here for groundwater levels for over 20 years, and we've already been following the DWR guidelines, so there's not a lot of changes there. As far as groundwater quality, we just talked about monitoring for saline intrusion. And really, the guidelines say to use existing groundwater quality data where it's available to the largest extent possible. So that's what we continue to do, is rely on the agencies that do that for those other constituents and reference that information. For subsidence, we are following the outline protocols basically that are in the BMPs. We have an extensive network throughout the county of GPS stations, which are recording those groundwater or the ground surface levels from year to year, so we can see any changes in that. We also have 3 what are called extensometer sites, which are more expensive, more accurate as well too. So those can actually measure down to 1/10 of a foot, which is 3 millimeters. And there's 3 of those in the county. A little bit later on the agenda, we'll get to a report that kind of talks about that a little bit too. And then for stream flow, we're really using existing stream gauge sites. So USGS and DWR have existing stream gauges in some of our creeks throughout the county, and we're relying on the work that's already there. So that pretty much highlights what we have in this monitoring protocol section. But if there's any questions, I'm happy to entertain those.
Questions or comments by agency members here? Is there any public go ahead.
I wasn't quite sure. I'm still vague on some of these acronyms, but you have OBS, and I didn't know if that was for a basin, a sub-basin. It's under the groundwater level data form manual measurements,
OBS.
which
Do you have
This
a
right
page number
here.
by chance? Oh,
It
on the actual
follows,
form itself.
Which,
it follows water surfaces table right here.
so if I may,
Could you?
we
please?
need to do is make a sheet, like a cheat sheet of all the acronyms.
Sure.
BCAG has a model you can follow. I mean, they've done it.
And that stands for observer. That's where you put your initials of your name.
Thank you.
Sure thing. I know.
That's a fair
I mean,
question.
I
think
searched.
If
Yep.
nothing else, the public, if they ever show all the
Exactly.
public shows an
Well, and
interest.
it's a good point.
We could have those acronyms spelled out for them, because
That's a
Thank
great
you.
idea.
we fall into using that. Any other questions by anybody here? Anybody from the public like to speak on this matter? We'll close public comment. Do we need to have a motion and pass that, or is it just for more like information? So up number 3, review of the DWR Technical Support Services Program and agreements for monitoring well installation. I kind of messed that up. We're talking about monitoring wells. Kelly, you're up again.
Okay, great, thanks. DWR has a
Be up a lot.
program called the Technical Support Services Program. It's one of their abilities to assist GSAs with data collection, et cetera. So one of their programs is installation of new monitoring wells. When I say monitoring wells, though, these are a little bit different than some of the normal wells that we have in Wyandotte Creek, since these are, I like to refer to them as multi-completion wells. These are one borehole with 3 different casings within that hole. And the difference between those 3 is that they're screened down at different depths. So we might have one that's screened at a shallower interval, one down a couple hundred feet below that in a separate casing, and then a deep casing that's screened at a deeper level. So the idea there is that as you're underground looking at these 3 areas, you can see what the differences are between our different areas in the underground structure. That actually gives us a lot of information in terms of if we were looking at pumping in the area, where is that affecting our underground water? Is it just affecting our shallow areas, or is it affecting our deep confined areas as well too? So it really gives us a lot more data, especially because of the fact that they have hourly data recorders in them. So we're collecting water levels every hour as opposed to 4 times a year. So it's a huge influx of data, gives us a really big, better understanding of where we're at. So this program basically will fund well drilling and installation of that on properties within the Wyandotte Creek subbasin. So that could be private properties, state properties, city-owned properties. So far, we've reached out to some folks that we know might have an interest, but it's really open to any landowner at this point who has an interest, because of the 3 subbasins here in Butte County, Wyandotte Creek doesn't have any of these monitoring wells.
Right.
So
How many are you proposing to put out?
right now, I'm working on an application with a potential site that's owned by South Feather Water and Power, but really, in Wyandotte, we're putting an application in for up to 4. I think we could do probably up to 6 here, Wyandotte Creek Basin, spread apart. That would give us a really good coverage. But the fact that we don't have any here in Wyandotte Creek Subbasin, I don't think we need to limit ourselves.
Strategize where to spread them out so they're not clustered.
Correct, yeah. And at this point, it's really just
Go,
a
Bill.
matter of willing landowners.
There's a willing landowner, I think.
Okay,
Yeah, I
so,
am willing, and I got a communication from Matt from South Feather asking if I was interested, but I just need to know what the process is. Just
Sure.
like what Bill says, I think they need to be spread out.
He's in the middle, right? Yeah, you're
Yep.
pretty much in the middle.
you're right, they do need to spread out. We need at least a quarter acre of cleared land for the drilling operations. Once those are done, the footprint will be quite small. It'll be a well. But it's about a 6-week operation. There'll be CEQA involved. There'll be a lot of noise. So some of the considerations we need to think about are how close they are to neighborhoods and people who might be impacted by that. We're also working with the Daly family. They've got property within the Wyandotte Creek subbasin as well, for potential wells on their place as well. And the city of Oroville has had some interest, so we're still following
So
up
there
with
would
that.
be north, middle, south.
So,
Yeah, so please get the word out as well to anyone who might be interested, because this is a free opportunity, which is hard to come by sometimes.
not done
But
with
it's
it.
really going to be beneficial for us moving forward, knowing more about the groundwater in our area.
I think that's a good idea, and what's the timeline on it?
As soon as possible, as soon as I can get an application in, they're kind of ready to spend the money. So, yeah, the sooner the better.
And the process is,
Contact me.
Okay.
I'll get a confirmation from you on a map. We'll get your APN. I'll ask you a few questions about land use in the area, if it's gravel on site, dirt, et cetera.
Okay.
Soil, sorry. Just a few questions like that, and then we'll push it forward and see what they say.
All right, thank you. Any
so-
questions or comments?
So this is something that you would have to interact with the surrounding neighbors, correct? You would, and what is that process?
So say for example, you had a home that you had a quarter acre cleared that was eligible for this type of
Right.
well drilling. I wouldn't interact with the neighbors necessarily, but probably the landowner should, to let them know that there's
Absolutely.
gonna be noise in the area.
So that is something that Bill specifically would be responsible for, and Mr. Daly.
Correct. Through CEQA, there's noise impact provisions, and those get analyzed, and then there's notifications sent out to a certain area around a project
Okay.
through CEQA, so that's probably likely what would happen as well, but, yeah.
Thank you, just wanted to
Sure
know
thing.
the process.
So I included those agreements. If that does go through, that would be an agreement between the GSA and DWR, and then a separate agreement would be between the GSA, DWR, and the landowner. Our council's reviewed those, just had a few minor comments about the potential for home ownership changes. Right now, this agreement wouldn't follow any sort of home ownership changes with the title, because it's not recordable. There's no legal description in the agreement, but that could be easily fixed by putting together a simple form. Take it to a local title company for minimal cost and just have a recordable agreement to that effect that is specific to that property description. So that's what he suggested as a way to circumvent that potential issue, because it's a 20-year agreement.
Okay, any questions or comments? Anybody from the public like to speak? Close public comment. Move on. Written communications were attached. Non-action items. Any questions or comments about the monthly financial status report?
That's good.
Form 700 reminder or the overall timeline?
Just a real quick, I put a supplemental financial report. The numbers are exactly the same, but I didn't update the date. So there have been no changes in terms of deposits or expenditures, but I just want to give you an updated copy.
Just backing up a little bit, we need to find at least 2 or 3 more locations for wells, so we need to work together to find that.
Yep, just send them to me.
All right. What about in Palermo? Could you use one in Palermo?
Absolutely.
I think I can arrange that, just remind me.
Okay.
So I know a landowner there. If anybody else has an idea, let her know.
I know a landowner in Fairmont, too. Well user.
All right, moving on, number 5, verbal reports, non-action items, a management committee update. Kelly?
So the format of this agenda got a little
Gonna go out of order, it's fine.
messed up, but there's a few things that kind of fit under the management committee update. And so one of those is an overview of the website, which is the next item, if we could just move
That's
to
fine.
that. Okay, that's more of a section header.
As long as it's
The format got
agendized, we're
messed
good.
up. Sure. And that's Chris.
Is it up in front of them? There we go. So this is for all the members, but a lot more for Kyle. So the Wyandotte Creek GSA website has been up for about 4 months now. We keep it updated monthly. If you scroll down just a hair, you can see, so we have GSA documents under the GSA map toggle, and that'll have a lot of things about the documentation that it took when Sigma started to bringing into why the Wyandotte Creek GSA was formed and the way it is, all the formation documents and everything. Under board members, that's going to be list you all, stakeholder advisory committee, that is still being formed, and in there are bylaws and the application that we're using to form that committee. All the meeting dates are within meetings, as well as you can access past agendas and agenda packets. And then some more hot links as you go down to include some of that. And then if you scroll all the way down, you can access, that's future meetings, and you can see the, the February's meeting, then the next meeting's 20th, 27th. And if there's any questions about the
Any
website.
questions or comments?
If you guys if you ever want anything added, or if you think it could use any additional content that you think would be advantageous to the board or to the public, let me know and I'll get it on there.
I just want you to use my picture, it's like 15 years old.
Oh, sure. You send it to me, I'll get it up there.
Scroll back up, please.
Oh, we gotta liven it up a little bit, this is kind of boring.
Thanks, Chris. It's really user-friendly.
It's a lot of work.
Yeah,
You bet.
good
Any
job.
public questions or comments on that? Thank you so much. Moving to the next item. You're in charge, Kelly, because you're out of order.
Take her away.
Thanks. Just real quick, we now finally have a 5-member full director seat, which is great with our new agricultural stakeholder director, Kyle. We're still in need of 2 secondary directors, and that's both for the agricultural stakeholder side and the domestic stakeholder side. There's 2 applications in the back. However, if you guys could all help get the word out, that's really, useful in case something comes up and there's absences or conflicts of interest. But just to have that full 10-member seated.
Just go tell them all, we're gonna put a meter on their well, they'll join.
There you go.
There you go. Next Farm Bureau meeting, cattlemen's.
And
Not true, not true,
They'll
disclaimer,
definitely
not
be at
true.
the next meeting.
Yeah.
we also have a potential upcoming change with one of our member agencies, Thermalito, and I'll let Chris speak to that real quick.
Brian, if you'd like, you can notify the board, we're gonna
Okay.
be, go
I
ahead.
am going to have to resign because I am moving to Missouri.
Show me.
More or less effective immediately. And I won't be here there won't be a meeting next month for March. And I'm leaving at the end-ish of April, 1st of May.
You're gonna be with
Wish
your
you the
family.
best.
so
Yes,
best-
yes.
'Best
Wish
of
you the
luck.
best. How exciting.
It is.
I love change.
I've lived where I live within 100 feet of where I was raised for 60 years.
Now.
Now, yeah,
Yes.
it's time for me to leave.
All right. Well, wish you
And
the
I regret
best.
that because this is actually, this is a challenge for me, but, I actually sort of enjoy it. I mean, I actually told Chris that it was hard and I wasn't real sure, you know? But it is a challenge and I do somewhat enjoy it, but it's more when I get past the challenge part, then, but that ain't never gonna happen, so. And I regret leaving, I do, because.
Yeah.
That's all I got.
Wow. Thank you.
Up next, then?
Yep. So we'll have a new director to fill in for your position,
Yes,
Brian.
I believe
at the next
Brad
meeting.
will fill in for me
Great.
next time.
Yeah, our alternate Brad Taggart will be here for the May meeting, and then from there, depending upon who
Yes,
replaces
The coffee shop.
Brian on the board.
There's a coffee shop.
Yeah.
Yeah, that Brad.
Okay.
Okay, we can move, if that's all right with you, move on
Yes.
to the Stakeholder Advisory Committee update.
Good.
So last time we met, we talked about the real need to have some of these positions filled. This is the 10-member position. It's our stakeholders, they're gonna provide feedback on this GSP. Since last meeting, we've had another additional person join. So now we've got a representative from Cal Water, one from South Feather Water and Power, and a new member from the Time Maidu tribe of the Berry Creek Rancheria. So we do have a tribal representative.
Great.
Our at-large positions, which are the 7 other open positions, we have not received any applications for yet. So at the public workshop that we discussed having, where we're starting to roll out some of these basin setting results, basically anybody that shows up to that, we are going to be heavily recruiting for and bringing lots of applications to that public workshop. So if there's any ability for the board, the public to help get the word out, to fill those positions, I also brought applications in the back there. It's a 2-pager, it's very simple, series of yes or no questions basically, and it'll be very helpful for this process. So if we don't get applications after that, we'll reassess sort of what that looks like, and maybe those positions won't be filled if there's no interest. But, yep,
Thanks for your diligence.
sure.
It's good to have a tribal member on board.
Absolutely. Okay. This might be a good time to skip ahead to a brief overview of Sigma. And I know that you guys have seen quite a few of those PowerPoints on the overview of Sigma. So what I decided to do today with our new director here is to go about this in a little bit of a different way. I found a less than 5-minute video. That's an overview of Sigma. It gives really the pertinent points. And then him and I can meet offline and discuss a little bit more as needed. This is actually for the Turlock Irrigation District. It's got a lot of similarities, but a lot of differences. So when we get into the actual basin geography and the actual underground infrastructure, we do have a lot of differences between our area and this. But it's a kind of a good overview of Sigma and also groundwater. And with that, we can just go ahead and start it if that works.
From 2012 to 2016, California experienced one of the worst droughts
Can
in
you turn that
history.
up, please?
Yeah, I might have
Thank you.
Were reduced to mere trickles. Many cities, farmers, and water districts pumped from underground water reserves. In the midst of that drought, California passed the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act, or
Sorry. I've got the volume all the way up on everything. Let me try another one. Let me try this.
Too many knobs or dials or slides or something.
Technology.
from 2012 to 2016, California experienced one of the worst
Not any
droughts in
louder.
its history.
Thank you,
As
Jackie.
reservoir levels dropped and rivers were reduced to mere trickles, many cities, farmers, and water districts pumped from underground water reserves. In the midst of that drought, California passed the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act, or SGMA, in 2014. Sigma requires our region to develop and implement detailed plans for how it will reach long-term groundwater sustainability. If you drink water, eat food, or grow crops, then this law matters to you. We all have a stake in this, and we all have a say in how this law is implemented locally. But first, let's get you familiar with groundwater. You live here, in what's called the San Joaquin Basin, one of the most agriculturally productive regions in the world. Within the San Joaquin Basin is a little sub-basin we call the Turlock Sub-Basin, one of 515 basins and sub-basins in the state. This sub-basin covers 347,000 acres between the Tuolumne, Merced, and San Joaquin rivers. You can imagine the San Joaquin Basin as a giant bedrock tub filled with sediments and clay left over from an ancient sea that once covered the valley floor, on top of which lies gravel, soils, and silts washed down from the Sierra. Mixed within the soils, silts, clays, and gravel exists a massive store of fresh water. It took thousands of years for most of this water to get trapped among the layers of earth. As rains, rivers, and flood irrigation slowly seep through the porous soil and rock on the surface, water collects underground in what we call aquifers. We've been pumping this groundwater through wells for over a century. Currently, every city in our region relies almost exclusively on these aquifers for drinking water, while some farmers use it either exclusively or to supplement surface water from the rivers for irrigation. Compared to the rest of the state, Turlock Sub-Basin groundwater has been managed quite well. It's in better condition than other subbasins due to a reliable surface water supply from local rivers, reducing reliance on groundwater. Through Sigma, California became the last state in the West to regulate groundwater. Sigma empowered local agencies with greater authority to manage local groundwater. Local agencies will regulate and enforce usage as groundwater sustainability agencies, or GSAs. The GSA's job is to come up with groundwater sustainability plans, or GSPs. These GSPs will be our guiding documents for the next 2 decades. They'll define what groundwater sustainability actually means for the Turlock Sub-Basin, as well as outline what projects and programs we are going to need to implement. The goal is that the GSAs will create GSPs that will lead to groundwater sustainability by the year 2042. Fortunately, our region's leaders have been focused on managing surface water and groundwater in a connected, complementary manner long before Sigma required it. 100 years of sustainable farming practices and reliable surface water has put the Turlock Sub-Basin in a good position for Sigma's success. Since 1995, the Turlock Sub-Basin public agencies have been coordinating and communicating through formal and informal partnerships. So, while critically overdrafted subbasins were required to submit their sustainability plans by 2020, we have until 2022 thanks to the historical stewardship which has ensured that the Turlock Sub-Basin is not critically overdrafted. GSPs will be submitted to, reviewed, and approved by the Department of Water Resources. Once approved, they'll be enforced locally by the GSAs, who can regulate groundwater management and usage. But if GSAs fail to achieve sustainability, or if their plans are largely deficient, the State Water Resources Control Board can dictate groundwater management locally and implement its own requirements upon the Turlock Sub-Basin. Our sub-basin is managed by 2 GSAs, a West Turlock GSA made up of these members, and an East Turlock GSA made up of these members. GSAs were formed through 2 years of collaborative discussions among local agencies. Together, we're making sure we achieve all groundwater sustainability goals within a unified GSP. Groundwater is critical to water management. Sigma and its associated regulations will shape our community for the next century. That's why we need the involvement of local stakeholders like you, because planning decisions are best made when they represent the community they affect. We've been charged with managing groundwater locally, and it's going to be one of the biggest water challenges of our generation.
Thank you.
Sure. And there are, like I said, a lot of differences. I wish we had one for our sub-basin, but given that, we're going to be working with the Northern California Water Association to try to develop one for the whole Sacramento Valley area to kind of provide some of this information.
From 2012 to
So,
2016,
if possible, we can move on to our own GSP in light of what we just heard about. We talked about our basin setting project, which includes our water budget information, our current groundwater conditions, our monitoring protocols, some of our monitoring networks. There's a whole series of sections there that incorporate the basin setting project. Right now, our consultants are working through some of the calibrations of the model still. However, yesterday, we had a meeting of what's termed the local experts group, and that's made up of people from all 3 subbasins in the county, representatives from Wyandotte Creek, Wyandotte GSA, growers in those areas, also domestic well owners. We've got professors from Chico State University in geology, and then our consultant team and our other, in the Butte Subbasin, there's Colusa and Glenn County, so some of the managers from there came over. So as the consultants roll out some of this preliminary information and the numbers associated with what are the inflows into the groundwater system, what are the outflows, what are the long-term implications of that, this group gets together, reviews that, and kind of puts some context to it to say, well, that doesn't jive with what we see, or yes, it does jive with what we see. And they also help they provide feedback so that that rollout makes more sense to the people that it's ultimately going to hit on the streets. So rather than providing lots of graphs with lots of data on it, making it more user-friendly in a way and understandable. So that group met yesterday and reviewed some of that data and provided that group feedback. So that's actually rolling out in all 3 subbasins. So for the Wyandotte Creek area, so we finally picked a date for the public workshop. That's going to be April 1st from 6 to 8 p.m. We're still currently trying to tie down the venue. So we're working with the Southside Community Center. I'm not sure if it's going to land there or not, but the date and the time are decided. April 1st, 6 to 8 p.m. And as far as the Butte Advisory Board, on that subbasin, they're going to be getting that in fact, their advisory board has their first meeting right now. So they're forming for the first time. They're going to be hearing that information. And then on the Vinus side, that's going through the stakeholder advisory committee that's being formed, and they're getting that information as it's rolled out in the next few months as well too. So that's the current status of the basin setting project. Like I said, that's about 4 or 5 sections of the entire GSP. The rest of the GSP also needs to be completed, and that's what we're considering the GSP completion RFP. So we talked about that last month also. That hit the streets. The deadline for that, for replies to that, is this Friday. So once we get those replies back, we'll start looking through the information. There's a review committee that's set up to look at those proposals that are submitted. Basically representatives of all 3 subbasins. And we'll be meeting to review those and discuss those in early March, and then pulling any of the potential consultants that had responses that were adequate back for interviews by mid-March. And so we're really hoping to get that contracted by April, if not May, and get the rest of the work started as well too. So the basin setting numbers will play into what the rest of the GSPs entail as well. So I just want to give you an update on that.
Questions or comments? Any public comment? Thank you. You're on a roll.
So yeah, that kind of covered our announcement. The last thing I wanted to cover real quickly was an overview of the Butte County Annual Groundwater Status Report. You've already heard this week, but I have a few slides I put together. This is something our department does every year to kind of capture what the hydrological conditions are for the previous water year. And so I wanted to share that with you guys. The management committee thought it would be useful.
And to point out that we're way ahead of Sigma. We did this for how many years prior to this?
This is about 18th for groundwater quality and 25 plus for overall.
Butte County's actually been ahead of the curve.
You want to do slides for me? Okay. So this annual groundwater status report covers the water year of 2019. Water years don't track calendar years. So they track the precip. So when most of the precipitation falls is October to April of a given year. And so we basically run it from October 1 to September 30th of each year. So when we talk about the 2019 water year, it's a couple years, or a couple months of 18 in there. It's required by Chapter 33 of the Butte County Code. So even with our transition to Sigma, we're still going to continue a lot of the monitoring because we're required to as well. So we're trying to really transition this report into that annual report that's required by Sigma, due every year in April. This was reviewed by our Butte County Water Commission's Technical Advisory Committee and also the Water Commission itself, and then presented to the board. And we got some feedback from them and questions on Tuesday this week. Next. This is the report outline, the contents of it, but the best way to find it is to go to our website, Butte County Water and Resource Conservation Department. That red circle tab up there under reports. You can pull down groundwater status report. You can see this one as well as the last 20 or so on there. So this is a graph of our water year types. What you'll see on the left axis is the water year indices, which range down from 2 up to 16. And this is really a number based off of runoff from our watershed that gives us an idea of how much runoff and precipitation we've had throughout the year. So it's a way to really compare where we are in one year to the next, just to show how we change and how that varies throughout that time. So water year 2019 was considered a wet year, but as you can see, not quite as wet as 2 years before that, which happened to be the wettest year on record. We can go ahead and move forward. Precipitation is indicated in this graph. So along the bottom, you'll see the water year from October 1 to October 1. This is when we got our rain. So that pink line is indicating the 2019 water year, and you can see when we got our water and really compare that to some other years. We had just over close to 71 inches, which is 137% of our long-term average. And that blue area in the middle is the long-term average. So you can see in 2019 it was quite above that. One other piece of our report is water quality. We talked about that a little bit earlier today. We really focus on salinity. So other pollutants, we let the other agencies who are good at doing that continue to do that work. Our focus is on agricultural uses and making sure that we're not overutilizing our groundwater to the fact that we're pulling up saline water from our marine sediments down below. We monitor 3 parameters: temperature, pH, and electrical conductivity, and those give us an indicator of whether or not the water is saline in between those parameters. So far, and in 2019, and so far overall, we haven't had any of exceedances of these for the parameters that we've set. We've also never seen any saline intrusion in Butte County in our groundwater. Lead subsidence is one other topic that's mentioned in there. As we talked about, it's the gradual settling of the earth due to potential overutilization of groundwater. And to date, we've had no inelastic land subsidence in Butte County. You can see there are some small deviations, and that's normal. As we get rain and precipitation and influx into the groundwater system from our rivers and lakes and rain, we do see some slight changes in the ground surface and some dips during the drought, but we've never seen it to a point where it doesn't recover. And so that's what you can see in these graphs. And the important thing to measure or to note here is that these are millimeters. So, even though it looks like potentially a big dip, it's 10 millimeters, which is, not much. So groundwater levels. We have about 130 wells throughout the county that we measure. We put, some of those have alert stages assigned to those, which we'll talk about a little bit more. And some of those have the data loggers with the hourly recording. We talked about how Wyandotte doesn't have any of those data loggers with the hourly recording, but they are throughout the county. There are different areas that have them. The others are measured 4 times a year. And that's, you know, when we went out to the field, that was what we were collecting
Right.
over the summer. It encompasses ag wells, municipal wells, domestic wells, and all of the data for all the wells is available online, which is nice. So you can see hydrographs in any region that you're interested in. This is a map of where those are. So, in this map, you can see we've got a number of different types of monitoring wells. The pink ones are the groundwater quality wells. We have about 13 of those throughout the county. And you can see just different indications. Some are hourly, some are 4 times a year. Those with the X's behind them are the extensometers. Those are our land subsidence sites, basically. And all of this is, in the appendices of the actual report itself. So if you want more information, just go to the website and you can pull all this up to see it better, because you probably can't see it very well back there. This is a map that DWR puts together every year. And this is based on groundwater level measurements for the spring. And what they do is they end up putting contours to that. So you might have seen contours in a topographic map or show where the peaks are and where the valleys are. Well, this is sort of that same idea, except it's underground water levels. So where they're higher versus lower. So we can start to see where groundwater is moving and where it's not moving, basically. So in general, in Butte County, it moves towards the river and down to the south and west. This is a change map. So it's another color-coded indication to sort of understand some of the data that we collect. This is a snapshot in time looking at March of last year to March of this year, and just the change between those. So what you'll see is the areas in blue had an increase in groundwater levels, and the areas in our beige and reds and pinks had a decrease in groundwater levels. So as you can imagine, well, Vina has a lot of blue in it. That area is very groundwater dependent. They actually don't have much surface water use at all. So you would expect with our wet year conditions to see that increase because, you know, as you saw before, we were 137% of precip for the year as compared to last year. And there are some red areas there in Wyandotte Creek with about 10, 11 foot decreases between one March and the other. That doesn't necessarily indicate a great deal of overuse necessarily, but it is something that, you know, we can keep an eye on and understand. The other thing about Wyandotte Creek is that you'll see those black dots there. There's quite a few less than in other areas of the county. So what they do is they take a measurement here and they take a measurement here at these wells and they interpolate in between those. But those areas are much larger. Those distances are much larger than, say, in Vina. So that's what this TSS monitoring well installation will help with also, is kind of filling those data gaps. In fall, if we compare the same snapshot in time, fall to fall of 18 to 19, we also saw changes, increases, about 3 foot increases overall. So overall, 2019 was a wet year, much above annual average precipitation. Statewide, it was also above. It was 131% above average. And runoff, which is our stream flow and precip coming off the watersheds, that was also above average, 135% of long-term average. We saw modest increases of about 3 feet between last year and this year, both in the spring and the fall. However, a lot of our wells do remain down near their historic lows based on looking at some of the alert stages that we've assigned to them. All this information is available online as well, and you can reach out to me if you're interested in some of those resources. We didn't have any saline intrusion in 2019 in our groundwater quality measurements. No exceedances for our basin management objectives, and no inelastic subsidence also. That I'll open up for questions.
Wow.
Questions or comments? Well,
It's a great synopsis.
Thanks.
Any public comment? Okay, anybody want to talk on something not on the agenda? We can't take action today, but you're more than welcome.
I would really like to have a report on
Is there one
K.
more item? Do you want to do your report? You want me to let me?
Hi, my name's Matt Thompson. I'm an engineer. I'm new to the city of Orville. I'm going to be taking
Oh, yeah,
over-
we got to do a letter for you.
The-
Sorry, go ahead.
No problem whatsoever.
Okay.
Mike is going to be taking over a more expanded role in the long-term projects and things like that, and I'm brought on to handle the day-to-day stuff and handle meetings like this. And one of those things I'll be looking into is applying for a grant from the state to improve drainage in South Oroville. One of the key factors the state's going to be looking for are recharge components. And as I get into the application process, it's my intention to come back and seek a letter of approval or endorsement from this board for the project, because that would help the chances in being selected. So it's just a heads up.
So I heard you say from this board, but also you're requesting a letter of support from the city of Oroville as well.
That's mandatory. I have to have.
And from the Board of Supervisors too?
No,
Okay,
the city of Chico will be applying, and I'm intending to put that on the March 17th agenda.
all right.
But one of the things the state looks for in the application is support from other groups, like
All right.
agencies like this. I'm going to go look for support from the community organizations in the South Oroville area. I just thought it was a good opportunity to make you people aware of the situation. Thank you.
Yeah, if you could run that drainage all the way down through Palermo and fix them too, it'd be great.
We'll see how much money they are willing to give me.
Yeah, dig the new Western Canal, I guess. Yeah, I think we'll support you. Yeah, I mean, why wouldn't we? Yeah. All right, I'm sorry. Now we'll do it. Anybody want to speak on something not on the agenda? Would you like to speak on something not on the agenda? No?
No.
Okay, we're gonna adjourn the meeting.
Oh, all right.
We're adjourned.
Well, thank you.
Thanks for being here, everybody, and it will get more and more fun as we go.
Thank you, Bill. Oh.
You're gonna miss out on all that.
I know.